Right, I think we can start. I'm going to silence my phone. Good. Right, we can start, and I welcome you all to today's Engage 3 on student success. This is HELM's online platform that enables engagement about key issues in higher education. I'm Birgit Schreiber and the moderator for HELM's online Engage series. Today we are addressing issues around student success. The COVID pandemic has shone a glaring spotlight on the context in which student learning and development take place. More precisely, learning and development are built upon the social, cultural, familial, discursive, micro and macro contexts into which our students are embedded. The questions we're asking today include: how should we reconceptualize student success in an increasingly complex and uncertain world? What are the new notions and approaches to student success, nationally and globally, that address contextual influences that impinge on or advance student success? And the third question is: student success is mission central, critical for the entire institution, the nation and the continent. How should it be supported by appropriate resourcing and organizational structures within and beyond the higher education sector? And to help us think about these questions, we welcome 3 highly esteemed speakers today who will share their thoughts from 3 different angles. We have Professor Ramnek Alawalya. He's the CEO of Higher Health, who will focus on student health and well-being, including gender-based violence as an ongoing impediment to success in South Africa. Professor Mary Howard Hamilton is Distinguished Research Professor and Chair, Department of Educational Leadership at Indiana State University in the USA, and she will talk about the importance of student engagement. And we also have Professor Sue McKenna, the Director of the Center for Postgraduate Studies at Rhodes University. And she will talk about, or she will contest with dominant notions of students as de-contextualized learners. Each speaker will take about 20 minutes, and then we have a chance to ask some questions. So I invite you all to type comments and questions into the chat as you like. A brief nod towards housekeeping or room etiquette, as it is now called. Please mute your phones, your microphones, and your phones, which mine doesn't seem to want to do. Please mute your microphones. Please use the chat facility to share and engage and ask questions and comments and develop networks. Just a note to say, we are recording this event. You can revisit it in the HELM YouTube channel. I will pop the link into the chat in a minute. So again, a very warm welcome to all the participants in the room. It's not easy making time for these events, but it's so vital that you do, and that we do, make time to talk about student success. So now over to our first speaker, and maybe just to say a note about our 3 speakers. They're all 3 highly published, widely published, having gotten so many awards and medals, and I had to shrink their bios really down because there is so much to say. So the first one for the next half an hour is Professor Ramnek Alawalya, who's a physician and a health systems policy and management specialist. He completed his MBCHB at Durban University, which of course today is UKZN, his MBA at UCT, and a PhD in public health. He's also Professor of Practice at Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Johannesburg. He has taught, researched, and practiced in at various levels in a variety of international contexts, including Germany, India, and Mauritius. He's currently the CEO of Higher Health, that looks into health, wellness, and development needs of all universities and TVETs, and has written widely on the issues of public health, has developed various governmental and sector-based policies and frameworks. He's part of several national and ministerial task teams on COVID, mental health, HIV, TB, gender-based violence, disabilities, drug addiction, and the NHI, amongst others. He's currently involved in the rollout of mass COVID vaccinations in South Africa through a public-private partnership model between government, Discovery, MedScheme, and Momentum. Professor Alawalya also serves on several boards of various governmental and non-governmental organizations in his capacity and served as health expert on the South African delegation for the BRICS countries in the academic forum. He has addressed as a speaker at conferences, forums, and symposia across the world and actively interacted with local and international media. So, Professor Alawalya, it's an honor to have you here, and thank you very much for making time. I know for you it's difficult. You're at the moment out of town, so I really appreciate this time you're making, and over to you. Thank you very much.
Bridget, first of all, greetings to you, to everyone, and I can't refuse you ever. And Bridget, I'll apologize that I would be leaving after my address, and when I'm about 17 or 18 minutes of my 20 minutes, do alert me so that I can start winding it up, or even 5 minutes earlier. I'm joined by one of my executive manager, Anusha Naidu. She's on the line. Should I leave? And there will be questions. Anusha will take the questions, and I just wanted to hope I do justice to what I'm being asked to. So I'll share my screen. Bridget, just tell me if the screen is visible so that, is it visible?
Perfect. Yeah, that's okay. Great.
I'm going to put it on the slide mode. Is it on a slide mode now? Not yet. Yeah.
Try again. No.
Okay. Enter full screen. There you go.
Yeah. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. It's a very thank you for HELM, and I have a history with HELM since about now. I was telling Bridget about 8 years back, and I always wanted HELM to focus on health and social and developmental issues. Predominantly, I think the issues that I'm going to be discussing in my topic are as much as very student-centered and student success and graduate success, but I think it impacts the entire post-school education fraternity, academics, management, frontline teams, and everyone in the post-school education. So, and I think what I will do is I'll throw a lot of data and I'll prove a point that post-school education needs to take health and wellness and development very, very seriously for student success, for throughputs, for our graduate competencies, for skills development project. And I'll link the two through a lot of data of modeling that higher health has been doing, both in the economic dividends, long-term dividends, and practical dividends around why. The other thing I will do is I'll try to also give you a solution to what we should be doing, what's the right way, and what higher health does, so that we mitigate. So it's not just about the problems we have, but also the solution. And I'll try doing justice to the 20 minutes. But if I struggle, I apologize. There's a lot that I would like to cover in this period. So it's a very big topic. It's a very critical topic. And I think it's the bread and butter for higher health, because that's the reason higher health is, which is student success by tackling pandemics, epidemics of youth or youth challenges, so that the success rates are high and our productivity model is extremely high. Sorry, my slides are not moving. Is it moving, Bridget? Just wanted to confirm from you.
We're on the first one still. Try and move it. That's it. Now? Yep, it's on the third now. So go one more.
Sorry, Bridget, I'm a bit struggling. Looks
there
like
you go.
It goes only, yeah, thank you.
There it is.
So Bridget, I'll speak about, not on behalf of public universities, but I'll also speak on behalf of higher health's work in 50 TVET colleges and about 300 sites in the TVET sector, which is predominantly very critical to our post-school education system. I'll speak to the 9 public CET colleges and community education training. It's a critical concept that the department is moving into. And we've got about 1,800 sites across this country, housing a huge amount of population now in this system. I'll speak about 137 private higher education, it's an old number, and 21 seaters. We've got about 1,000 skill development providers under them, and national skills funds, India Airline. Our post-school education system is very big. But public universities do become the biggest component of the whole entire post-school system. And allow me to speak around the whole system, because at the end, if we're talking about student success, we're talking about our skills development, we're talking about productivity modeling, we're discussing about what we're trying to build in South Africa as the next future. I think it depends not only on just the public universities, but the other critical skills building components for our system in together. So, a lot of my talk will have data and discussions around these big components in the post-school education and training system. Allow me to spend some time on this slide. In fact, other slides are kind of component to this slide. Now, if I say 8.1 million South Africans live with HIV, and that's a bloody big number. It's a huge population of South Africa. And when I say the predominant age group that is highly vulnerable to this pandemic of HIV is 18 to 24, where the first new infections, specifically young girls or young women, and then we have a deep problem. And just imagine the same young child coming from a very poor rural household. It's my first exposure when I came to post-school in 2010. And I went and traveled to East London, and I see a young girl coming from a rural town in Old Transkei, coming into East London campuses, and coming from very poorly privileged backgrounds, and first in the family. Most of this is a true story of many South Africans who are trying to come up in the post-school education, post-transformation. And they are highly vulnerable to these pandemics and epidemics. And if this young girl becomes HIV positive, and now while she has the disease that she has to now survive with, she has to complete exams. She has to be absolutely strong. She has to be ensuring that she's tested, she's taking ARVs, her health is deteriorating, her productivity is down. That's affecting graduate success. If I say South Africa is the third largest country with the TB pandemic, that affects South Africa. 70% of people living with HIV are affected with TB, and TB is the actual cause of death for young people. And that's a real stressful disease for us to deal with. When we say 1/3 young girls in higher education become pregnant on campus, we have an issue. And in universities, only 20, so by the time they realize they are pregnant, as per our studies, they're already 16 to 18 weeks. They're young, they do not realize, and they can't abort at that time. So they end up conceiving, they end up giving birth to a child. And the retention rate after the whole being motherly situation, the very young, tender age of 18, 19, first of all, the mother's womb is not ready. But the other thing is, that young woman has another life to look after. So the retention rate is only 20% in universities and about 10% in TVET colleges, even less, as to little data that we have. But then we have a problem. When we say 10% of the whole gender-based violence is centered in our universities, when we say 1 in 3 women in South Africa below the age of 21 gets raped, when we talk about 54% of our population among young women feeling sexual assault, sexual violence, and just imagine a young woman who has a partner violence at home, a young woman who has a domestic abuser as a partner, she's in an abusive relationship, or a young woman who's faced a difficult gender-based violence as a reality in this country. And then she comes into the same system of post-school education. She might be living with the same perpetrator on a day-to-day basis, or she has to survive that perpetrator in order to come out of her psychosocial stressor, the life she has to live, and the future ahead of us. And she is in a law qualification, or she is in an arts qualification, it's in medicine qualification in one of our universities and colleges. And that's the reality that tests our student success. And when we talk about, if you ask me the next pandemic I'm going to speak about, if you ask me if I have to single out a pandemic, that's actually the major reason of our student success is mental health. I've got enormous studies to tell you right now, and I'll show you a lot of data results. Why mental health? And if our situation of mental health, remember, we are a young country, and South Africa has to believe it's a young country. It is a young country. It's about 27 years to our independence. At 27 years, we've inherited a very difficult past. People coming from broken families, single mothers raising children, abusive relationships. And this is a generation trying to come out in South Africa, in our institutions of higher learning, for a future that depends, the entire country's future depends on the post-school education. Right from a plumber, a miner, electrician, a waitress at a mug and bean that we wait, or a fishery industry, or automobile industry, is everything TVET colleges. Doctors, managers, engineers, consultants, bankers, the entire economic sense from university perspective. Our community education, giving a second life to any school dropout at any age, knitting, carpentry, community skills so that person can get employable. All we are trying from post-school education is building a skill for employability, for employment, and that's the last success that we are looking and aiming towards. And when this young life has to come out of our post-school education and has to go to a private sector or a government job or a non-governmental job, the employer is looking for productivity. And this unhealthy child or a student living with health and epidemics or surrounded with so many challenges, even though with an average graduate success that we are trying to, or with the graduate competency, needs to do a productivity model with the employer is saying, well, this is, I'm just going to name one university, say Rhodes, but please don't take me wrong, I'm 26, any of them. And so the alumni of Rhodes, this is not the productivity Rhodes is giving. And this is a challenge. And mental health is a massive challenge. And one of our latest results from our survey done on 13,000 students on COVID impact has shown 65% moderate to severe mental health challenges like anxiety and depression in this population. And the same population has to now compete a very difficult system for a graduate success or a student success. If I say 5 to 7% of our population is actually LGBTQI within our institutions of higher learning, a study done of 9,000 students across 19 universities in South Africa from higher health, the biggest in Africa in volume perspective. And when we speak about this population, and we speak about that only 30% are graduating, 70% drop out, predominantly because of stigma, their highest exposure to not succeeding graduate because of, it's not just, they are the most intelligent brains we have. These are intelligent South Africans, but our system builds a stigma in such a way that it kills them. And we don't see that as management, as leadership. And HELM needs to see that part. And that is exactly where I will be approaching my discussion and solutions to it. When we talk about 62%, 61% in TVET colleges, and our last study done in universities is quite a back, 2010, that was about 36% or 35% of students abusing drugs and alcohol every month to the level they do not know who they slept with or where they ended up with. That kind of an abuse, that kind of an addiction. If you ask me, this pandemic or drugs and alcohol, which is very highly prevalent, you can link it to any disease here. Gender-based violence, 65% of GBV in South Africa is preceded by drugs and alcohol. We're the highest in the world. The next country to us is United States, with about 58% as per the WHO 2016 study. Drugs and alcohol, HIV. Drugs and alcohol, highest link with mental health. Drugs and alcohol, if I show you the data, 60% of LGBTQI students abuse drugs and alcohol before any sexual behavior or anything because of their low self-esteem and challenges that we have produced into it. Disability, not just that we have to be careful about disabled students, but about the population to start respecting, because that's another vulnerable population that's been highly vulnerable to HIV, highly vulnerable to any graduate success, not finding ways, and a massive population. Data and stats of population with disability is enormous. And if you link disability, you can link with any disease. If your last stage of HIV is disability as an employer, gender-based violence, the last stage is you're disabled, you're mentally disabled, you're not able to perform. The mental health, it's disability at the end of the day. It's emotional disabilities, psychosocial disability, physical disability is another angle to work into. So these are all interconnected pandemics coming from a similar origin. And as post-school education, as leadership, as management, we need to be very cognizant of it because they exist around us and they are existing in your final goal that you are trying to achieve as higher education. A graduate, an employable workforce, a skill that's going to go into the workspace and develop. And if we are not mindful of them, we're going to be killing ourselves. The last part is COVID. And we've integrated, we know this pandemic is now becoming endemic. I don't want to go deeper into the science of this pandemic, but you've all been reading everywhere. You probably have a deeper understanding on COVID-19 now. But clearly, COVID-19 pandemic is a recently found virus which has loved a human body, is moving nicely from one body to the other, finding a body where it sits and mutates, and just keep on mutating. We got a vaccine that can distort it, but it's our human behavior which will not still give us that confidence that our humans will be together, united to defeat this virus. Any virus can be defeated. It's the behavior that makes the virus enjoy what the virus wants to survive, because all virus is doing is surviving. And it survives by overtaking our human bodies and enjoying our human self for its own food and appetite. So I have spoken about this. I have spoken a lot about GBV and the data, but I wanted to tell you that I just picked up one disease, gender-based violence, and I call it a pandemic. It's a disease. It's a huge social and health pandemic. It's not a unilateral pandemic, I guess, like a COVID, as you have a treatment for like a vaccine or a prevention methodologies. GBV is multi-dimensional. But if you look at data from United Kingdom, it's massive. GBV doesn't exist only in South Africa. In higher education. This is campus reality from UK, a global campus reality from United States. I don't want to go deep into every data of United States. Every province and state in the United States and every institution has reported enormous amounts of sexual assaults and sexual violences. 20% of female students in the United States alone cannot walk out freely because they feel they're going to be sexually assaulted some of the other time. India, Brazilian study of universities shows 56.3% of some kind of violence. It's not South African pandemic. And I wanted to clarify, it's a communal pandemic with microcosm, but we give birth as a peer-to-peer environment in such a way that it elevates to another reality. I've spoken a lot about this data and I don't want to repeat it and just wanted to make a point. We've got a pandemic and we've got a serious pandemic on our table at this moment. Similarly, mental health, a lot of data on depression, anxiety. We've got data as high as about 24.7% with major depression disorder, 65% now due to COVID exaggeration. We've got 35% suicidal ideations now. We've got serious issues of mental health at this moment. And I spoke a lot about TVET, 60% of TVET students, 35% of the students in universities with drugs and alcohol. And I quote the results of our studies. It says, how students manage to deal with their emotional health will determine how they manage their studies and achieve their qualification and aims. The mental well-being of students will also have a critical long-term impact on their lives and the impact on the country and economically and socially, exactly the link I'm trying to make it. I spoke a lot about LGBTQI. Just to let you know, we're coming out of COVID. The good news is we officially considering ourselves out of third wave. Is a very important time for our young people. If we can get young people, the youth, the students will decide the trajectory of the pandemic of COVID-19 very clearly. We are a young continent. We are a young country. Our median age is 27 years and Africa is 14 years. And if this age group, which is the majority, starts taking vaccination, do not let the virus move as freely as it's enjoying, do not let them mutate, we can overcome this virus. And that's the whole effort of higher health. And there's a solution where our ethos, our Ubuntu-ness, our togetherness can help us achieve a lot bigger than we wanted to. I don't want to go deeper into COVID. I just thought beta and delta have been the reason of our second and third wave, where the first wave was, while we've seen other variants in it, we've been reading these variants very clearly. These are our variants of interest. The reason why I put this is because some of these variants mutations are mutating to a level that we are watching can lead us to the fourth wave. And that's why I put this. And why I said this is because if you see May data, how beta used to be the dominant variant, which is the variant detected in South Africa for COVID. And suddenly in June, it was delta. So it takes one mutation. And mutations are happening in two forms. One is the escape mutation, which means the immunity that we produce by getting a virus, it weans off and suddenly a new variant comes that starts escaping that immunity, which is our natural immunity. While the other one is highly transmissible. They like to bind with the human body, replicate faster, the viral load is high and start spreading quickly. And Delta did the same for us. Vaccine immunity is a far longer and a far wider immunity, and that's why it's better than the natural immunity. Higher Health has been trying a lot with all our institutions. I think 18 universities established vaccination sites. All vaccine points are, every day we pick vaccines and bring and vaccinate on students. The reason I'm saying this is this is bringing easy access for vaccines to students, so the student success cannot go around. And all we're doing is promoting vaccines. A study of a little bit of COVID-19 and its impact looked at study space, challenges of students on study space. We realized half of the students only reported they had a suitable study place to study. Challenges with electricity. This is real challenges when we're looking at remote learning or hybrid modeling. We looked at income of students, parents losing their jobs, guardian affecting students. And the reality is food security, like 2/5 of the students didn't have the food to purchase. And these are realities of student success challenges. And a further 28.6% said they were able to buy their food sometimes. And similarly, we went on detailing around not having money, loss of social contact, affecting their studying time, of course, availability of internet or data, but must say the results are outstanding for universities who have really gone out of the way and supporting. The results clearly shown that how universities actually provided internet access and data bundles. TVETs did struggle, and about 15% of the TVETs did not have access to internet at all. So there's a lot of longitudinal study, and it might take Bridget one other session to just go deeper into the study which the minister launched at CPUT. And it goes into every element from loss of emotional support, study time, electricity, parents losing jobs, parents dying, guardians dying, and how it was impacting on every student and the mental well-being or student success, their fear on hybrid system or online system or an open learning system versus the contact learning system. The reality is that our universities, besides UNISA, were built as contact learning. You cannot replace completely contact learning with online learning. Yes, the hybrid model can work. I can't see as a doctor being trained completely virtually. It's practically not possible. And one day we have to come out of this COVID umbrella and start coming out. But there are advantages what this has shown that we can make it happen, but not swayed to completely one side called virtual learning versus one side, because that's a huge bearing on the mental health and well-being, the stress levels, the psychosocial impact that we're clearly seeing. And if you look at the data, 65% of students have experienced mild to severe psychosocial distress. The gender-based violence has increased by 25.4%. And the domestic violence, the 9 types of different violences that we valued into it. I think this is the data which obviously affects all of us. When we talk about 30% of our students in the fourth and, sorry, I can't, just give me a second. Yeah, 30% of students in 4-year degrees and 40% of students in 3-year degrees do not graduate after 10 years in the system. Of graduation on time for 3-year degrees less than 30%. All I'm trying to do with this data is trying to relate that these soft issues are affecting the graduate success, are affecting our throughputs, are affecting our competencies. So what does higher health do is it fights this notion through this modeling called primary, secondary, and tertiary level. Now, we went to all the deans and said, you know, engineering or mining or agricultural or humanities or arts, culture, I said, can you incorporate health and mental well-being as part of the curriculum? And we spent a lot of money, studies doing this, thinking, can we enroll the first curriculum with this mechanism? But obviously their curriculums are congested. They're very tight. They're trying to finish the whole curriculum in this little space of time. Plus the academic time is killed through these sometimes COVID or student unrest or many other challenges that affects our universities on day-to-day basis. And then we thought to ourselves as higher health, why not we start on something called an extramural curriculum? And in schools, people do music, or French, or other study, or rugby, or sports. And we said, these are things that affect, tell me one South African who can tell me that they do not have any effect with HIV, or they do not have a family member or a friend not living with HIV. Gender-based violence, they're not facing GBV, or they do not have someone they know very closely who's not suffering from GBV. This is day-to-day bread and butter in every family house. Mental health, the reality of it, stigmatized, living quietly. We've just launched a 24-hour helpline. We have 18,000 crises in just 9 months. And that's the reality of everybody. And if such diseases are realities of us, then we said, why not we have them as extramural curriculum? And I can tell you 1 million South Africans join our second curriculum. It's become so popular that they come here for a certificate, a small certificate that they do on completion of these extramural classrooms on HIV, studies on gender-based violence, or a class on mental health, a class on disability, a class on drugs and alcohol, class on sexual reproductive health. And they get these certificates. And when they go to private sector, they add this qualification along with their certificate, along with their main qualification, and the employer likes it. The employer says, okay, there is another student who's competing with another student and has some kind of health and wellness understanding, has a knowledge of GBV, has a knowledge of mental health, understands a little bit further. And that gives a competitive edge. That gives employment probabilities. And all we did was we allowed young people to get enrolled into the second curriculum. And second curriculum is an interactive curriculum, a peer-to-peer led, no exams, but come and learn. Only one exam you do, and that is do a risk assessment. After you've done mental health class, do a risk assessment of mental health on yourself, on a binary way. Simple asking questions like, are you struggling to cope with daily activities because you're feeling tired and without energy, or unexcited, excited, or too much energy? Do you avoid people? Do you think about a plan, different ways to kill yourself? Yes or no? A person starts understanding. Similarly, we have something on gender-based violence. We have even a screening mechanism for perpetrators. So if you are a perpetrator in a class, you can actually, after a gender-based violence class, you can actually go and do a perpetrator risk screening, because all we are doing is, as soon as you are on high risk to HIV or TB, we link you to care right at your doorsteps. A psychologist, a social worker, for reporting mechanisms. There's a lot of work going on GBV at this moment. We've just released about 3 protocols and 3 guidelines on procedural guidelines of reporting, putting tribunals, learning from some of our brilliant work in universities around how to tackle GBV, but making it universal to our TVETs, our community education colleges, to rural universities, so that we can tackle easy reporting. But the other part is the psychosocial linkage and availability of far more safer rooms and any other things. I'm just picking up one element of GBV. So I won't go further. I think my time might be coming, Bridget, but just to put my last point that this is very critical for any graduate success. And if you really ask me, if you want to increase our throughputs, you want to increase our competencies, we want to increase our productivity model. We want to see our alumni with far better reciprocal effects on the production model in the employable systems or employment systems. Health and wellness will play a massive role, specifically in a country which is as disprivileged as ours is. And it's surrounded by something which we call, hate saying, youth pandemics. And it's very sad to see young people dying earlier than older people. And this is a country which is facing this. And it's the norm that old people must die before young people. And when the reverse happens, we have a challenge, and it affects all our system, and specifically a system that produces the next economy. So thank you for allowing me to present. And Bridget, hope I justified, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ramnek. It's been lovely hearing it. And I think your slides are very dense and hugely useful to all of us. So we will have the slides on the website for people to use it and to look at it and just go over the talk. Time is running out. So Prof Alawalya, I want to let you go because I know your time is pressed, pressed for time. And Anusha Naidu, can I have you for a minute if there's a question, or should we go on to Mary?
I'm here for a minute. Should there be a question?
So the one, I think, Ramnek, there was I think the intersectionality of the difficulties you highlighted hugely. I think one of the questions that came through in the public chat, and interesting, two of them to me privately, and I wonder if people perhaps struggle to ask these questions openly. How do we assist students in seeing the importance of vaccination? It's a politicized, it's a divider, that kind of question. But what's your position on that?
So we've just been so there are three types of students we have, and we've done a study in modeling into it. The 1/3 of our student population or any population in the country is a population that even will stand 8 hours in a queue and get vaccinated because they want to get vaccinated. They believe in vaccination. Then we have something called missing 1/3. The missing middle 1/3 are those people who know vaccinations are important, but are looking at some incentivization or saying, can vaccine be easy access to me? I don't want to go to the hospital. Or they have some reasons of why not to get vaccinated. And then there's the last 1/3. And the last 1/3 is the one who's made up their mind they're not going to get vaccinated. They're fully influenced under the anti-vaxxers. South Africa has achieved the first 1/3 already. We got those people because we've opened so many good vaccination sites in our universities and vaccine points. As I said, 44 TVETs itself are vaccine points. All our universities are accredited vaccination sites or vaccine points. It means vaccines are on the sites available. The missing 1/3 is where the focus is now. And the missing 1/3, our first aim is, how do we soft incentivize? How do we possibly make what we call it more for youth-friendly accesses, or give a little bit of more traction towards vaccine promotion, peer-to-peer influence. But when you come to the last 1/3, and that is where the question of regulations will come. And for our strategy, we still think it's a bit too early. While mandatory vaccination is critical for us to now start debating and discussing, which is very important. And the occupational health allows us. It's a notifiable disease. It's a public health disease. It's a disease where you're mixing vaccinated people with non-vaccinated people. And it's clear that the vaccinated people transmit the infection half compared to the non-vaccinated. So you're mixing population. So our aim is regulations will be start imposing, coming up with health sciences, because it's not about young people getting high risk to COVID because of their exposure in the hospitals, but they also transmitting the infection to patients. So there's a dual cross relationship, which obviously brings health sciences as a very strategic level of vaccination. The second one is our residences, congregate setting, people residing together, living together. So phased approach of regulations will come in picture, and that's how we will start getting our vaccination done.
Yeah, I'm a little bit reminded of the HIV rollout in the days when we did that peer-to-peer education, and a lot of that, we've learned a lot of lessons from those days that we can now transport into the here and now. So thank you very much, and we're going to release you because I know your parents are waiting on the other end, your mother, and we're grateful that she has supported you being here. Thank you very much. We're now going to move on to Dr. Mary Howard Hamilton, our next speaker. And let me see if we can spotlight her. Mary, there you are. Oh, that's wonderful. Prof Professor Mary Howard Hamilton, I want to read you her CV. It is also, again, she is so decorated and she has achieved so much over the years. So I really want to just highlight a few aspects. She's the Bayer College of Education Kaufman Distinguished Research Professor and Chair of the Department of Educational Leadership at Indiana State University in the USA. Over the past decade, she received major awards and medals, too many to mention here, but just two I want to mention because we're very familiar with it. The one is the George D. Koo Outstanding Contribution to Literature and Research Award from NASPA that a lot of us are familiar with, and then the Distinguished Service Award from the Indiana State University itself. So Dr. Howard Hamilton received the Presidential Medal from the Association for the Study of Higher Education and was a recipient of the Contribution to Knowledge Award from the American College Personnel Association. Indiana State University awarded her with the Presidential Medal for Exemplary Teaching and Scholarship, and so the list goes on. Just to share further that, Mary, you've been in higher education student affairs for 15 years in the administration part, full-time faculty and academic administrator for 28 years. As a researcher, Dr. Howard Hamilton has published over 100 articles and book chapters, has been a presenter at the Oxford Roundtable in Oxford, England. She's also served as a consultant for higher education in South Africa. We've welcomed her before, I've welcomed her before to our institution, and it's been an absolute joy having you there. And the one thing I picked up from your bio, which was really funny, is that you love gardening. And when I then read further, I could see that you'd received an award for excellent gardening. So clearly you're a high achiever on all fronts, Mary. So over to you. And we look forward to your presentation. I'm going to give you a signal after about 25 or 20 minutes. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Birgit. And I am going to share my screen. And let's see here. There we go. And we will put it on.
There you go.
We're now on the on the regular slideshow.
Not yet on the slide.
All righty. Let's see if I can. Here we go. That's better, right?
That's right. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Birgit, thank you so very much for inviting me. And hello, everyone. Greetings from good morning from the United States. It is morning here, and I'm so thankful that I get to follow Dr. Alawalya because his material weaves in comfortably and beautifully with what I would like to share with you today. I'm going to be talking primarily about student success, and a lot of my examples will come from the United States. Quite a few examples also will come from other countries who have found methods and ways to engage students during difficult times. Just as Dr. Alawalya stated, we are in a world pandemic, and it's time to shift. It's time to shift the way that we're thinking. It's time to shift the way that we're operating and engaging in our policies and processes at colleges and universities around the world. Go to the next slide. There we go. So what I'd like to do is provide you with some context. It's really important, and you're probably saying, what does enrollment have to do with anything related to what we're experiencing in terms of student success? Actually, quite a bit. As I mentioned, fortunately, and Dr. Alawalya provided us with an amazing context in terms of the top 10 issues impacting not only South Africa, but colleges and universities worldwide. Gender-based violence, yes, United States. I'm surprised that the United States is second. I would say that that's probably because of our reporting methods, which in terms of gender-based violence, there's so much shame involved with reporting any type of domestic abuse that most individuals don't call the police, don't report it. So I'm surprised that we're second. However, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that the same issues that he mentioned are the same issues that impact the United States. Enrollment. Okay, so how does all of this weave together? Well, enrollment is crucial to think about because that's how we base our budgets. That's how we make sure that we have the infrastructure to provide good services and provide the type of structures for teaching, upgrade our technology, improve our services. Enrollment is crucial because our students pay the bulk of the tuition and fees that keeps our universities moving and evolving in the United States. As you all know, with the pandemic that occurred, what has happened is that when the enrollments plummeted on most campuses, and even now the enrollments of many colleges and universities are struggling to get the numbers back up again and to get the students back to campus again. Enrollment is crucial because it pays, in the United States, it pays for the tuition and fees, which again pays for the greatest chunk that comes out of our budget. It pays for salaries and it pays for the personnel and people. That's the largest chunk. What I'm going to be doing is, of course, I'm going to be talking about higher education and things related, issues related to student success and student success in the US. But again, just want to make sure you know that I am going to be very broad in my recommendations. So what do we want to know? We want to know who's enrolling in college. That makes a big difference. It does make a big difference because it helps us understand the changing demographics on our college campuses. What are the enrollment trends? What are some of the programs that students are gravitating towards? And one of the things I didn't do is I really didn't put that slide back into my presentation, but I can answer that question very quickly. There are two areas in the States that students are gravitating towards, and it's business and it's the health-related fields. What's the makeup of the staff and the faculty? Critical to understand, because the makeup of the staff and the faculty and the personnel on campus gives us a really good idea of who's teaching our students and from what context, from what lens. Are they teaching from the perspective of a dominant or oppressive lens? Or are we looking at the demographics where faculty and staff are coming in with a broader perspective of being more supportive of the students who are being impacted by mental health crisis, COVID crisis? Who are the individuals who are in our classrooms? And are they ready to transition to really help the students that are matriculating on our campuses? What programs enhance student learning and development? I want to thank my two good friends and colleagues, Dr. Dennis Roberts and Dr. Susan Comavis, for providing me with a really amazing resource that helped me conceptualize and pull together some of my ideas today to share with you. And what teaching strategies, you know, you can't just talk about the co-curricular. You can't just discuss what we need to do in the reses. We can't just discuss what needs to happen programmatically. We also must discuss what is happening in our classrooms. The students are paying tuition and fees to get a degree, and who's teaching them, and do those individuals who teach our students, do they value the different voices and the different challenges our students are bringing to our campuses? So we know, we see the enrollment trend. It's going up. And this, again, let me make sure I provide you again with some backdrop and some context for what you're looking at. This is an enrollment trend in the United States. However, I have no doubt that the enrollments are increasing around the globe. And what we see here is that these are this is the enrollment trend for colleges and universities in the US that have an enrollment of 20,000 or more students. The reason why I only selected this particular cluster and that piece of data is because I know that most colleges and universities around the globe do have large student enrollments. In the States, there are over 4,600 colleges and universities, and they vary from profit, nonprofit, private, large, public. However, what we see in the States is that the largest enrollment increase is occurring on our campuses, again, with 20,000 or more students. So my conversation will really be focused on that, on that particular type of institution that has a large enrollment, large student population. This shouldn't surprise anyone. This graphic should not surprise anyone at all, because we know that in 2012, just fewer than a decade, just fewer than 9 years ago, a decade ago, we were not even thinking about distance education being put, or colleges and universities moving from brick and mortar, our tradition, moving from brick and mortar to going distant. And of course, we know that this increase, this spike, mainly occurred because of the COVID factor. The distance learning skyrocketed in the United States. And what we're trying to do here is trying to also pivot as best we can, because our students, as well as our faculty and staff and administrators, became quite comfortable being at home and teaching and learning from the confines of our own environment. Again, quite different, because as I heard Dr. Alawalya state, some of the challenges across the globe are brownouts, blackouts, electricity, the lack of the technology and the Wi-Fi connectivity to be able to even engage in classroom and learning opportunities in your own home. Also, we've got the challenge of individuals in their own home, and you have, as he stated, you add the components of perhaps domestic violence, interruptions, disruptions, and a person is trying to learn. The coping mechanisms become insurmountable. And when you have individuals who don't care whether or not a person is going to be learning and studying, you have this disparity and this incongruity between an individual who wants to really improve his or her place and space in life, and another individual who wants to continue to oppress. So what we have is, with this COVID spike, is in the distance learning, we clearly have widened the gap of the haves and the have-nots, and they became so clear. We talked about it. We knew that there are haves and have-nots. We talked about, this is a post-racial society. We're really becoming more, we're narrowing the gap. No, we're not. Even in the States, with regards to distance learning, what we found is that we have students in what we call our rural communities who had no connectivity. We created unique ways to get them involved and engaged. But again, it opened the door for teachers to see literally what was happening behind it, within the environment, and behind the student and behind the camera. So again, let's weave all this together and take Dr. Alawalya's comments, along with our enrollment data, along with demographic shifts. In the States, our colleges and universities are predominantly white. And again, that gap became wider and more noticeable during COVID, because it became noticeable due to the haves and have-nots, socioeconomic status. If you're going to flip the platform completely, all of our students were told to go home. In many instances, some students said, where am I going to go? the res is where, this is my home. If I go back home, again, I don't have Wi-Fi. I don't have the best computer. I know that when I go home, my parents and my family won't understand why I'm sitting in front of a computer 4 or 5 hours a day, learning, sitting in the classroom when I should be out working and contributing. So we have this student race and ethnicity gap in the United States. Particularly, we have more white students attending. This is also with regards to our larger institutions. And we also have a smaller number of minoritized students, specifically Latino, Latina, African American, and Asian students attending our colleges and universities. Then we look at gender. Now, interestingly enough, our gender numbers are beginning to flip in the United States, where we're beginning to see more women, but more white women attending colleges and universities as compared to men. But still, the disparity in the United States is still quite prevalent, because when we see these women graduate, they're still earning somewhere in the neighborhood of about 68 cents to 78 cents for every dollar that a man earns when she graduates from college. This is important because most of our instructional staff, as well as our administrators on our colleges and universities, anywhere between 67 to 90% of the individuals who operate our colleges and universities in the States are white. That's an important piece to remember, because now you're getting at who creates the policies, what are some of the systems being operationalized that are not social justice oriented. Though this is a critical piece of the puzzle, because one of my recommendations will involve, what do we do? How do we create an environment where everyone understands all those mental health and cultural nuances that are needed in order to flip what is happening with our colleges, with our students on college and university campuses? Again, this is a graphic that gives you a sense of, it really brings home, and you can really see the bar of white women and white men who are teaching and who are administrators in our colleges, universities. And these individuals they are teaching the minoritized students. So what type of influence do they have when they're in the classroom, as well as when they're administrators on campus? So let's get into more of how all of these components weave into creating a student success model on your colleges and university campuses that can be inclusive and be a basis for equity and be reflective of diversity. So in the most recent Chronicle of Higher Education, Stacey and Hogan wrote a really good piece on how to take, or how to make your teaching more inclusive. And I read this and I said, to me, these are, it's a no-brainer. However, when you have individuals who, faculty or particularly our professors, who again have been teaching on a platform that is brick and mortar, the classroom face to face, and then all of a sudden, now you are distanced, and now you have this, you've opened the door, opened the curtains, opened the window to seeing what's happening behind the scenes in a student's personal home environment. You can't help but to say to yourself, there's more to this person, there's more to this story, there's more to what this student is bringing to the classroom than just me imparting information to him or her. Now I need to be more humanistic. So, classroom challenges and advice. Teaching inclusively means embracing student diversity in all forms, race, gender, ethnicity, just as Dr. Alawalya stated, all forms, including what that student brings from his or her or them, the toxic environment that they bring to the classroom. Because we all have some sort of toxicity that, as he mentioned, we all have some sort of toxicity that's occurring in our lives. And you've got to remember, faculties, they must remember that you're not just, the student is not just bringing a book, a pen, a laptop, and a backpack to class. In that backpack is everything that has occurred to that student in his or her lifetime, as well as that morning. It could have been no breakfast. It could have been no food on the table. It could have been something with regards to finances. It could have been alcohol. It could have been gender-based violence. All of that is being brought in that knapsack to the classroom. And any professor who taught on a distance platform last year saw that behind the camera. They saw that. So you must, now every person teaching must be inclusive in the way, in the style that the class is being taught. Well, so professors will say, okay, I teach math, I teach science, but so I have to have a diversity lesson and everything. No. You should, but being inclusive and equity and being equitable in your teaching methods means doing that with your teaching methods so that all voices are heard and understood. And now this means that you need to weave some personal pieces into the classroom environment. So it means that designing and teaching courses in ways that foster talent in all students, but especially those who come from groups traditionally excluded in higher education. You must include those voices. And before, it was easy to let the dominant voice always be heard. The student always had the answer. But now, on a Zoom platform, using different distance platform, using a hybrid teaching method, and as we begin to come back to face-to-face, it's more important to get the students to become more verbal. That's one of the things we found with this Zoom platform, is that it's easy to put your avatar on and hide. And what we found is that we are encouraging students, take off your avatar, be engaged. So here are some things, here's some strategies according to the authors of this Chronicle article. And I could not have phrased these things even better than they did. So structure, the more the better. So you're probably saying, well, structure, isn't that very linear and very very traditional? Structure meaning in this environment, particularly with students who are coming from various backgrounds of learning, it's important on your course curriculum and your syllabus is to be very, very clear and explicit about what's due, the rubrics, the outcomes, teaching to the outcomes. It's also important in terms of structure to have a COVID-19 policy, which lets the students know that you understand the diverse challenges that are occurring within the world of our pandemic. So you'll have structure, but you'll be flexible and you'll listen when it comes to those challenges that those students are bringing to you. Allow for silence in the thinking and processing. And it's uncomfortable in a distance platform. It's uncomfortable to go 20 seconds could seem like 5 minutes or 10 or 15 or 20. However, the silence can also be packaged, and the thinking processes can be packaged in a way where you ask students to write down their thoughts. share anonymously what they are processing and what information they're gathering from your classroom. Small group structured discussions in the classroom as well as on the Zoom platform, putting them in breakout rooms and having conversations. Allow anonymous participation. In other words, anonymous participation in which the student jots down what they're thinking and what information they're bringing in. But then again, with that anonymous participation, you read a card and you say, this is a thought that was shared based on what the student is processing. Connect personally. She, her, hers, they, them, theirs, or z. Names. Know the names of your students. I know these things sound very sophomoric, but you'd be surprised how many professors still stand in front of the classroom, regurgitate information, put it on a test, very old school, and expect that information to be shared back on, and the student gets a grade. Send
Mary,
a quick note to,
Mary, may I speak? Sorry, can I ask? So we've got about 3 or 4 minutes, but I want to also one or two questions that came that are so interesting, and I want to hear your thoughts on those.
All right.
No, but you go ahead.
Okay. All right. And what I'll do is I will wrap up very quickly because I think I have only got one more slide. I'll wrap up very quickly on this. So quick note to students who are going through challenging issues, and share part of yourself. It's okay to share a story. Don't go overboard, but as Birgit said, I'm a gardener and I share that journey with my students. I have a pet. Acknowledge hard times, you must. And last but not least, let's talk a little bit again about how to know that these techniques are working. Peer observations. Let's go back to having your colleague come in and evaluate and assess how you're teaching your students. Who looks lost? Who looks connected to you? Student success. Roberts and Comovies have these listed several amazing programs, first year adjustment program in the res, and that was in a South African program where there are peers who help students adjust to the programs and activities, and flipping from college to university, or from high school to university, or tertiary to secondary. Adversity training. That was a program that was implemented in a Chinese environment, which talks about how to prepare a student for the challenges of being from some of the policies and practices in that particular country being created, and how to move through the adversities and be successful in colleges and university educating socially responsible leaders. All students should be trained to become socially responsible. All faculties should be trained and retrained how to be socially responsible. That's a recommendation that I have. Use appropriate theoretical concepts. It could be Ubuntu. It could be certain theories, because the theories help you with understanding your biases, and to learn what the needs are of your students. Most importantly, review the policies and practices on campus that are no longer relevant to today's challenges. Review your COVID-19 policy. If you don't have one, it needs to be created. Review your grief policy. If you don't have one, it needs to be created. And review your mental health policy. In the States, for example, I'll give you a very good example. We have some very antiquated policies in which there are certain, staff and faculty are given a certain amount of days off, depending upon the closeness of the relative who may have passed away. So, for example, you have a partner or a spouse, and the university says you only get 4 days to deal with this grief. Well, in COVID, you need more, because you may have perhaps expected, sadly, that person may pass, but in COVID, you may not have expected this. And so now you've got grief, a death, mental wellness, mental health issues. It's exacerbated because of where we are in this pandemic period. So I'm going to stop here. Birgit, I'm looking forward to the questions. What have you got for me?
This is lovely. Thank you so much, Mary. It's been, there's a lot we can glean from this. The parallels are so definitely there, and what we're experiencing here around reviewing our policies, speaking to HR, speaking to our care policies, our mental health policies on campus, we do need to review them, and speedily so. And it's the same in the States, I gather. Just a quick question. One, I think that I've had some private ones to me, but the one I want to pick is, if our students are living in home environments or certainly away from campus, how do we offer contextualized support? Not just kind of doing it online, but what can we do that is reaching them in their context where they are, right, where they're studying and living? What ideas would you give, or what's recommendations?
I've thought about that quite a bit. And one of the beauties of learning in this environment is that people can begin to move around a bit more. So one of my recommendations is remote, moving at the faculties, moving and teaching where the students are. So for example, if there is an opportunity to find a facility, find a location where faculties can go teach closer to the student, and closer to that student's community. It could be a building that now has some office space available. That's happened quite a bit in the States. A lot of businesses have moved out and gone remote. And so we have literally empty malls, empty buildings, empty office structures, move to where the students are. Don't have the students try to adapt to us. We go to them and we teach where they are located within walking distance. Another thing that in the States that we did with the students in the rural environments, just one more example, in the rural communities, we put connectivity, Wi-Fi access in buses, and put the buses in those communities so that the students and the children can connect to that Wi-Fi service and go to class. So there's the bus has Verizon or whatever, AT&T Wi-Fi capabilities. Bus driver drove there and the students connected. So you've got to find people who are really progressive thinkers and think way outside of the box. Did that help a little bit, Birgit?
Hugely so. So the idea that, we go to the student and take the material there and not just occupy perhaps a building near our students, but to drive a bus that offers Wi-Fi connectivity. And a bus is a safe space. People can sit inside and study. It's I hadn't even thought of it myself. So it's really a fantastic idea. But more of these, I think, are on your references that you've provided. Again, for everybody to know that the PowerPoint will be shared with you and the references are lovely. So they're very, very useful. Mary, thank you so much for making the time for just speaking to us. And I believe next year you'll be visiting South Africa. I might see you. I look forward to seeing you. Yeah. And thank you very, very much for being with us. We're going to go to our next speaker. And Professor Sue McKenna, can we spotlight you? Are you here? Yes, you are. I can see. Oh, yeah, your camera's better now. Great. Professor McKenna is a professor of higher education and is the director of the Center for Postgraduate Studies at Rhodes University. She also runs a large PhD program in social justice and higher education. And her research reflects a concern about who gets access to knowledge in the academy and whose knowledge is valued. The recent co-authored open access publication include Understanding Higher Education and Going to University, both published by African Minds in Somerset West. She's an outstanding contributor to our understanding of contextualized learning. Sue, so we're very much looking forward to your PowerPoint and to your presentation. I just wanted to mention that we've gone slightly over time, but there is enough time for a full great half an hour with you. Thank you very much, Sue.
Thanks so much, Birgit. Hopefully you can see my slide.
Yes, thank you. That's lovely.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and good afternoon from Makanda to all of you. So the theme for this afternoon's session, as you've already heard from the previous two speakers, is all about student success. Now, when we think about student success, of course, there are hundreds and thousands of journal articles published on this issue with suggestions that we need to flip classrooms, we need to use peer assessment, we need to include technology, we need to get rid of chalk or talk. No, we need to go back to chalk or talk. We need to use problem-based learning. No, we mustn't use problem-based learning. And so it goes on and on and on. And what I'd like to suggest today is that perhaps any of these interventions are fabulous and they might work in a particular context, but they may well then fail dismally in another context, because there is no simple generic best practice that works across all contexts. It's the context of education that matters. What subject is being taught? What is the form of the knowledge that's being taught? Who is teaching it? Where is it being taught? Who are the students? What do they want? What do they value? What do they know? What will they need to do with the knowledge they're acquiring? And so on. And I think that too often we focus on pedagogical interventions as if they might be the solution. And I see this happening a lot during COVID as well, as if, you know, having the right interactive assessment or the most sophisticated proctoring tool is going to resolve whatever problems emerge and save the day. But what I'd like to argue is that what we need to do is step back and reflect on our individual and our collective understandings of the purpose of higher education, and then the purpose of our teaching. Otherwise, we're really just tinkering away at the surface. So I'm going to be drawing today largely on the chapter on students from a book that you just mentioned, thanks, Bridget, about called Understanding Higher Education, that I've co-authored with Chrissy Bowie. And don't worry, I'm not trying to get your bucks here. If you're so inclined to read it, it is available for free on the African Minds website. And I'm going to be doing this firstly by looking or by presenting a few key premises of what I think a higher education is for, and that I think we need to explicitly articulate in our universities. I think the premises I present are ones that most of you believe, but which may be missing, or even if we do ascribe to them, we don't clearly articulate how they permeate our curricula and how it is that we interact with students, or how it is that we assess learning and so on. I'm then going to move on to discuss a few of the problematic myths, which Chrissy and my research suggests are very resilient in the university and which lead to a number of injustices in the system. So the first fundamental premise of higher education that I'm going to share, in my view, is that student success entails achieving a transformative relationship with knowledge. This means that students need to do more than get through the syllabus. When they graduate, they need to have new understandings of themselves and of the fields they have studied. They need to understand their place in the world in new and responsible ways. Now, of course, bringing students into a transformative relationship with knowledge is no easy feat. It entails, amongst other things, accepting the need for a pedagogy of discomfort. This means understanding that our students are on an identity journey as they take on new practices and new ways of being in the world. And this is challenging in any context. And given the two previous presentations and what we know of our current COVID context, I think we can just appreciate the significance of undertaking such an identity journey, the significance for our students' mental well-being. Learning to think in new ways, learning to make sense of complex concepts, accessing principled, abstract knowledge. I mean, these are tough things. But if students leave the academy with nothing more than a set of facts that they didn't have when they entered, but they haven't enjoyed transformative relationship to knowledge, then I don't believe they've had a higher education. The role of an education is to challenge us and to help us to grow. So this journey to a transformative relationship to knowledge has identity implications. It can be uncomfortable and challenging, but just because it needs a pedagogy of discomfort doesn't mean it should ever entail feelings of alienation or worthlessness. Indeed, a pedagogy of discomfort requires an ethics of care. We as academics need to have a deep commitment to both our students and to the knowledge project. You know, when Freire challenges us to understand education as an act of love, he argues that commitment to education entails a commitment to both knowledge and to people. I think we need to have in ourselves and to instill in our students a commitment to responsible knowledge creation, dissemination, and implementation for the public good. This ethics of care entails an explicit acknowledgement of the elite colonial nature of higher education, where it has always served, at least in part, to reinforce stratifications in society, rather than to build a shared capacity for knowledge creation. So I think calling for a transformative relationship to knowledge to be at the heart of higher education is more than a call to change the immediate status quo. It also needs to be a rejection of higher education of the past. Bringing together these ideas, the idea of a transformative relationship to knowledge being at the heart of a higher education, and it requiring a pedagogy of discomfort and an ethic of care, requires that we ask of ourselves and of others, what knowledge is powerful in helping all people to flourish? And what knowledge simply serves the interests of the elite? We need to question what kinds of knowers are being rewarded with success in the system, and which knowers are being marginalized and excluded. It means asking whether our graduates go out to contribute to the common good, as the UNESCO definition of higher education suggests that they should, or whether we have graduates who actually plunder the resources of the planet and who've learned during their higher education years how to excavate wealth from the well-being of others. Understanding a higher education in these terms is incredibly challenging, but it's also enormously rewarding. Now, of course, I get that not all of you would take the definition of higher education as I have it on the slide as the most central conceptualization of a higher education. I'm sure a lot of you would like me to include various other purposes of the academy, but if we can agree that at least in part, these premises should be at the heart of higher education, then I'm going to take that as a given, and I'm now going to move on to reflect on some of the myths that are embedded in the academy, which I think challenge our ability to attain this. Okay, so myth number one. Myth number one is that higher education is meritocracy, where everyone is treated fairly, and if you succeed or you fail, it's on your own merits. Sadly, higher education is not a meritocracy, though the belief that it is seems to permeate every building on campus, every policy, every committee. We like to believe that it's hard work and motivation that leads to the successes of our students and our staff. We want to think that epistemic access, which is access to the principled knowledge in the university, we want to believe that epistemic access is equally attainable by all students as long as they buckle down and work hard. We like to assume that those students who fail or who fall by the wayside do so because of something that is lacking within them. It's not our fault. And perhaps it's human nature, you know, to try and find an explanation that absolves us as academics and people working in the university. It's human nature, perhaps, to find a means to absolve ourselves of responsibility. This notion that higher education is a meritocracy where students' epistemic access and success emerges from their own actions is deeply comforting to us. So perhaps it's not surprising that we continue to spread the myth, even though this myth ignores the wealth of research across every country in the world, where it has repeatedly been shown that social class is the single strongest correlation to higher education success, and not intellect or motivation or work ethic. The myth that higher education is a meritocracy is closely aligned to what Chrissy and I have come to call the discourse of the de-contextualised learner. The discourse of the de-contextualised learner suggests that success or failure emerges from attributes inherent in the individual. In this discourse, students are decontextualized from the norms, values, expectations, and prior knowledges and practices that they bring with them. They are simply a collection of their inherent attributes. We might have strong students or bright students or hardworking students or motivated students. And if instead we do not have such students, but instead are faced with, I don't know, lazy students or dwarf students or slow students or disadvantaged students or unprepared students, well, you know, then there's little surprise that they drop out. This assumption of the decontextualized learner is that success and failure emerges entirely from individual attributes. But then we need to look carefully at the racially differentiated success rates across every university in South Africa, and alarm bells should ring about this discourse. And yet they don't. I mean, if it is the attributes inherent in the individual that lead to success or failure in higher education, why is it that white students are outperforming Black students? Despite the need to dismiss this discourse of the decontextualized learner for its inevitably racist conclusions, or the need to, you could also dismiss it because it's just so simplistically causal in its account of student success. Despite all of this, it continues to persist. The research that Chrissy and I have undertaken over a number of years suggests that not only is this discourse dominant, but it is used to justify all sorts of interventions to fix the student. I should make clear that the discourse of decontextualized learner is not only about the attributes inherent in the individual, like intelligence and motivation and so on. It's also about this idea of neutral skills that students either do have or don't have. Study skills, language skills, writing skills, computing skills, and so on and so forth. And each of these set of skills is positioned as if they're completely neutral, completely generic, and students either have them, tick, or don't have them, cross. So they may have got them, I don't know, from their schooling, or perhaps the university can add on some courses to offer these skills. But certainly the literature and the work that Chrissy and I have done argues that these skills are not neutral, and they're not things you either have or don't have. These are social practices. They are contextualized social practices. They are weird. They're specific, and they're not skills that you learn through training. They're social practices that are underpinned by very peculiar norms and values of the academy or the fields of study within it. Some of which, by the way, need to be tossed, but that's a conversation for another day. And by the way, it's not only the student who's decontextualized by this dominant discourse, it's the university that's also absented in this explanation of student success and failure. The university is rendered completely invisible. There's no need to consider the extent to which our curricula or our teaching or our assessment are socially just or unjust, because we already have the explanation for student success and failure. It's the students. We just need a neutral syllabus and they must learn, and if they've got the right intellect, they'll succeed. I'm exaggerating slightly, but this discourse really is everywhere. So why is this problematic set of myths so prevalent and resilient? And what is it about the understanding of higher education as a meritocracy and the conceptualization of students as individualized, decontextualized learner that is so attractive? I mean, one of the key reasons, as I've already hinted, why these problematic myths continue is that they allow us to absent the reality that higher education parallels class and that it is not a socially just space. Because if we admit this, if we admit that the meritocracy and decontextualized learners are myths, then it challenges our whole notion that higher education is a public good. It challenges this whole idea of the university as a space of social justice. It challenges this idea that we nurture critical citizenry. Perhaps most significantly, to admit that our dominant conception of education is problematic changes everything. And it means that we now have to ensure epistemic access with epistemic justice. And that is so much harder than getting through the syllabus. You know, we need to make sure that our students are offered every opportunity to enjoy a transformative relationship with knowledge, that they are treated with an ethics of care, that they have an understanding that this will include moments of discomfort. We have to make sure that our students leave the academy with a sense of responsibility to all people and to the planet. And I think this is a much greater challenge to all of us than sticking with the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. That was amazing. Thank you very, very much. You came to a faster end than I anticipated. That's fantastic. There were there were lovely comments and chats that were coming. Again, I want to encourage everybody to do public posting of the comments, also to me, of course, if you feel it's a sensitive comment also. Sue, can I ask you some questions?
Yes.
So there was a comment from Rita Knutzer saying that perhaps a pedagogy of discomfort should also include a lecturer's willingness to experience discomfort and be challenged by what the students bring into the classroom.
Yep.
Do you want to comment a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Prof Howard Hamilton spoke about, you know, we need to acknowledge the hard times. And I think being vulnerable is so important. One of the things about a very instrumentalist neoliberal university is it becomes more and more difficult to mess up. It becomes more and more difficult to say, oh God, I've just stuffed up big time, you know. I got rejected, I didn't get this grant, I forgot to fill in this form in time. Showing our vulnerability is so important. I mean, another classic space, the space that I've had to really sort of sit with my own discomfort has been making more and more spaces for translanguaging in my own classrooms, and just accepting that sometimes students are having amazing intellectual conversations that I don't understand. You know, that's okay. I don't need to be in control all the time. So I think that's, Rita, I think you're spot on. A pedagogy of discomfort should be uncomfortable for all of us at times, but with the aim of a transformative relationship with knowledge. It should not be discomfort for its own sake. It needs the ethic of care.
I loved what you were saying about when students study, they're not just 3 years more knowledgeable in a field, but they're 3 years or degree years different. They're qualitatively different, or they ought to be. There's a qualitative difference when they engage with knowledge in higher education as a transformative avenue. Just a quick comment also came from, is it Janet? She says, in her department, many lecturers for the first time really thought about what they're doing with students, and they saw students, much like Mary was explaining as well, they saw the students as real people in their real contexts. So that's one plus from the COVID teaching time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we mustn't miss out on all the lessons that we've learned. And for some people who've been so resistant to the technology, this has been an enormously powerful time. But I, for one, am a big believer in the benefits of face-to-face. I I miss having a cup of coffee with my students. I miss looking people in the eye. I miss all the extracurricular stuff. So much of learning happens through our community engagement, through, you know, Prof Alawalya was talking about, you know, that extracurricular stuff, and so much of that stuff has been set aside. I also think, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but I also think that there have been some negative effects of our learning online in terms of the way in which a very sort of techno-instrumentalist thinking, which I see emerging in our universities, came to full bloom under COVID, and in particular around proctoring software. That it's another whole talk, but I really worry about the extent of use of proctoring software in our universities. Sort of constantly, it's not, let's not call it proctoring software, it's spyware. That's what it is, and it's problematic.
Can you make a comment on, somebody posted a question on the risk at the moment that there's a lot of instructional teaching going on, that we assess for content, and that we're missing this kind of that learning is relational and we're missing that component. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think sometimes people understand the call for a transformative relationship with knowledge in a way that that means that in a way that makes it possible to carve the knowledge out. So it becomes all about the relationship, all about the identity. And I think that's highly problematic. You know, students want access to knowledge. That's what they're there for. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. I think the decolonial scholars have really challenged us. I felt very personally challenged to rethink what I understand as powerful knowledge. But knowledge, you know, principled knowledge, abstracted knowledge, students need that, but it's not something that you can get in a generic external way. We've all had that moment, that aha moment, when a penny's dropped, when you suddenly understand a concept, and it can be a very objective physics concept or mathematics concept, but it changes you. So these concepts don't always have to be concepts about ethics and morality and who you are in the world, although I believe regardless of your discipline, your higher education should include that. But it's yeah, a transformational relationship with knowledge the focus is on both the relationship and the knowledge.
So I want to thank you for that. I want to just see if there's any more comments coming. There are one or two that I wonder, Sue, if you can go into chat and to see if you can reply to them in detail here. And then there was a question around your email, and I've asked people to email me so that I can put you in contact with people interested in being in contact with you. For now, I want to thank everyone for being here. We want to close at 45. We're a few minutes early. If there are any more comments, we've got one more. I get a lot of thank yous I can see here. That's lovely. So I want to thank everyone for being here, for making the time, for bearing with us. We've had over 100 people here. A lot of people were struggling with the link that was posted. These links, the technical challenges I see, and I just wanted to recognize and make mention of that. I want to thank everyone. I want to also remind you to please fill in your evaluation form, or the evaluation. There's a quick 2 questions that you can please do before you leave the room. Please also know that the YouTube channel contains the recording of today. And I also want to now specifically thank our 3 speakers. It's exceptional to sit for 2 hours and listen to your thoughts and listen to how you share what you're doing and what you've published. Just having listened to you has been really amazing and enriching. And I can see the participants have also enjoyed that. So Sue, Mary and Ramnek, thank you very, very much for making the time, but also to all the participants. I think it's very hard being out there in academia, in the universities at the moment, and to make the time to be here. It was very important, and it's vital for our own understanding of our work. So thank you all, and wish you a fantastic rest of the afternoon, and we'll see you again in a month's time at the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Birgit.
Bye.
Bye, Nisha.
Last year, then they corrected that report.
Bye-bye. Thank you for the meeting.
Who's talking now? Let me see. Bye.